Good afternoon. My study is called The Impact of the Ongoing COVID-19 Pandemic on Teachers' Feelings of Self-Efficacy and Burnout. The framework of this research is based on uses Albert Bandera's behavioral psychology framework, and he defines self-efficacy as a person's belief that they can carry out complex tasks. And then the working definition of teacher self-efficacy is that it's a teacher's belief that they can effectively handle their professional tasks, obligations, and challenges. A phenomenon that we now know as burnout came from the symptoms that were observed in the 1970s, and the working definition of burnout for the study is from WHO, which is the definition is that it is a syndrome that is caused by chronic unmanaged workplace stress characterized by exhaustion, detachment, and cynicism towards work and reduced professional effectiveness. This is the framework that will inform the rest of the study, its results, and my implications. The research questions for this study were: what were teachers' current levels of TSC during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic? Is there a relationship between teachers' current levels of TSC and feelings of burnout or stress during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic? And what factors were impacting teachers' current levels of TSC and how can we address them? The methodology was mixed methods. Snowball sampling was performed by using social media and a Google Form digital survey. The digital survey components were the teacher self-efficacy scale short form, now going to be referred to as TSES, the socio-contextual teacher burnout inventory or STBI, and demographic questions, technology comfort, burnout, and COVID-19 pandemic related questions from the 2020 to 2021 National Teacher and Principal Survey, now just referred to as NTPS. And then also researcher created open-ended survey questions. All of the quantitative research and data was analyzed using SPSS, but the coding process for the qualitative responses used a process based on Swain's inductive and deductive coding using a priori and then post coding that followed a three-step phase. So as you can see, phase one was open coding, phase two was post coding, and then phase three was creating code families or themes. So in phase one, I just did initial coding using my a priori codes from the surveys and literature. Phase two, I developed more codes from the participants' words and common terminology. And then in phase three, I took all of those codes and created themes to show the relationship between all the codes. The research questions had several sub-questions that allow me to answer the questions as fully as possible. And on this screen, you can see them here and the specific survey tool that was used to gather its data. So I'll just give you a second to take a look at that. Unfortunately, my survey sampling was a bit lackluster and I only had 108 respondents. But from these demographic charts, you can see that my respondents were mostly white, non-Hispanic females and who were public school teachers. I did find statistically significant results between race and in years of experience. In the years of experience, you can see that the groups were fairly even, except for the respondents towards the beginning of their careers and towards the end of their careers, which are here. So between 1 and 3 years, 4 and 6 years, and then these are people who have 31 plus years of experience. So question one was answered using the TSES and the NTPS technology comfort questions that I had on my survey. The TSES Likert scale is from 1 to 9, with 1 meaning nothing and 9 meaning a great deal. So we can see that the highest score was in the instructional strategy subscale of the TSES, and it was right above quite a bit of influence, and the rest were right below it. The NTPS technology comfort Likert scale was 1 from extremely uncomfortable to 9 extremely comfortable, and my respondents' median score was just above comfortable, or a Likert scale of 7. This study did find statistically significant results between white, non-Hispanic, and non-white respondents, with the non-white respondents having significantly higher TSE scores. There was also a small positive relationship between higher TSES and technology comfort, as well as a small negative relationship between higher burnout and technology comfort that was found. So, in other words, the higher the TSES score, the higher the technology comfort score was, and the higher the burnout score, the lower the technology comfort score was. Overall, though, to answer this question as simply as possible, teachers felt they had considerable influence over their ability to effectively manage their professional tasks, obligations, and challenges. For question two, I first actually had to find my burnout results and then see what the relationship might be between burnout and TSE. So in terms of burnout, the both indicators, the STBI and their NTPS results, aligned with approximately 2/3 of respondents reporting moderate to high burnout levels, with only 1/3 indicating mild or little burnout. The STBI, I'm sure, is a new scale for many people. It is a scale that goes from 1 to 7. 1 is completely disagree, 7 is completely agree, and then they only have 4 as neutral, and respondents can choose where they fall along that. The overall score is taken by actually just adding all 9 questions together, while the subscales are unweighted means. So you can see the difference in those scores there. My respondents showed moderate to high burnout levels between the overall and the subscales. The NTPS burnout actually tracks the frequency of symptoms, and its Likert scale was between, sorry, its Likert scale was 1 was never and 9 was daily. So my respondents were experiencing burnout between once a month or once a week, depending on the symptoms. Statistically significant results were also found for the NTPS burnout items between years of experience. Specifically, the 7 to 10 years of experience group had higher burnout compared to the 11 to 15 years of experience group, and they had a difference of 26 points. Overall, the burnout results are that the burnout levels were generally moderate to high, while 2/3 of the respondents reported moderate to severe burnout symptoms. The correlation results for question two were that the STBI and NTPS burnout items had statistically significant positive correlations, but this is expected because they were both measuring burnout. But I believe that is a good thing that they performed and correlated as expected. And then also both burnout indicators had statistically significant negative correlations with the TSES. And additionally, it was found that the professional inadequacy subscale of the STBI also statistically significantly had a negative correlation with the TSES overall and 2 of the subscales, but negatively correlated across the board with the TSES. Again, these results were somewhat expected, as previous research has shown higher TSE tends to have a mediating effect on burnout, and higher burnout has a negative effect on TSE. Question three was my qualitative section of this research, and my discussion of it. The results are going to be will be in terms of the positive factors to TSE and why, the negative factors to TSE and why, and then what teachers advocated for to help their TSE. So as you can see at the top, in the coded responses, the negative impacts overwhelmingly outweighed the positive impacts. For example, my first question, the negative impacts had 308 coded responses, while the other had 26 codes underneath of it. The positive factors to TSE had the themes of supportive work environments and personal teaching experience. Supportive work environment included supportive administration, support and good working relationships with colleagues, and then engaged students or students who are engaged in their learning. And then personal teaching experience really spoke to the teacher's own content knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and their own teaching experiences. My respondents explained that these reasons why were the reasons why these things were positive were within the themes of empowerment, experience, professional development, student achievement, and support. They felt empowered to make decisions based on their student needs. Experience in PD gave them the tools to support multiple levels of needs in their classrooms and gave them several methods for instruction and management. Respondents also felt successful when their students showed growth, and administration and community support also enhanced all of these reasons. In terms of negative factors to TSC, the major themes that emerged were unsupportive work environments, student behavior and disengagement, and unsustainable workloads. The unsupportive working environment is basically the exact opposite of the positive. So it includes lack of support from administration, lack of support from parents, and then also a severe lack of support for student behaviors. Student behavior and disengagement talked about negative student behaviors, lack of student accountability, lack of student consequences, and an increase in student apathy. And the unsustainable workload included references to class sizes, paperwork, attrition, or low staffing, having responsibilities not directly related to teaching, and just not having enough time. My respondents explained why, citing mental health, pay, ineffective policies, more references to students, and lack of support. So with the mental health, people were literally saying, I'm exhausted, I feel inadequate, I'm always full of stress. Someone even referenced feeling like they were drowning all the time. Pay was discussed by a few respondents in that it added to their stressors because they could not support their families on their teaching salaries, and that led to them taking second or even third jobs, which then leads to physical exhaustion beyond the mental toll that also takes. Ineffective policies included attendance, discipline, and grading policies. And then the students, again, was talking about behavior, low achievement and drive, and then also pandemic trauma that we are seeing in our students. The lack of support included administration, colleagues, parents, and a few references to the shift in society, not respecting the teaching profession or valuing the service um, professions as much as it did in the past. And then workloads, it's just that it's been changing demands, and the changing demands are usually increasing every year. And the duties, meetings, paperwork that is required, staff, lack of staffing, and there's a lack of time. As this quote from respondent 48 shows, there it shows the dichotomy that my quantitative results showed. So she feels effective in her actual classroom instruction and work with the students. But the rest of her workload leads her to end with, I feel like a failure. Like, that's pretty powerful, and it kinda hits me right in my heart because she feels like when she's with her students, she's effective, but everything else is making her feel like a failure. And this shows the results that of the teachers are self-reporting fairly high teacher self-efficacy while also self-reporting, high feelings of professional inadequacy. So they feel confident in their content knowledge and pedagogy, but the current working conditions are completely negating their positive hired TSE. So how can we help them? And this is where teachers really were able to advocate for what they felt they needed. So they fell into three main themes, which is building confidence to meet their students' needs, reducing workloads, and addressing mental health. Underneath building confidence to meet student needs, there was academics, positive behavior intervention, and professional development. Academics included references to COVID-19 considerations and addressing the learning loss that we know occurred during that time. Um, the professional development that people asked for was crisis prevention intervention, restorative practices, and trauma informed practices. They advocated for professional development at a ratio of 3 to 1. It is apparent through this that the teachers are trying to address the increasingly difficult managing the increasing difficulties in managing the negative student behaviors that we saw was a negative impact. Not only does the negative behaviors are escalating, but the students are also showing more minor to major negative behaviors than they were before the pandemic. In reducing workloads, class sizes were mentioned, increasing planning time, policy changes, removing of responsibilities and staffing issues. In terms of the policy changes, it included academic attendance, discipline, and special education policies. And these outweighed the other themes by 3 to 1 as well. The teachers were really advocating for clearer discipline ladders and consequences and spoke of consistently applied discipline throughout a school building. And while that may not seem like a workload, if you remember that teachers are responsible for managing classroom offenses, contacting parents, and tracking student behavior, that becomes more challenging with unclear expectations and discipline procedures. In in terms of addressing mental health, I'm sorry. They also asked for removal of responsibilities such as having less non-teaching duties, less redundant paperwork, or meetings that, as everybody knows the joke, this meeting could have been an email, but we sit through meetings like that many times a week. Staffing included change like references to perhaps administration changes and actually hiring more staff and substitutes. So our buildings are fully staffed, and then we have substitutes for when staff members need to be out. One respondent specifically wrote about the guilt she felt for needing to take off, knowing that there wasn't any substitutes and it was going to create more work on her colleagues. For addressing mental health, respondents advocated for it for staff and students. And while salary might seem like it wouldn't fit under here, as we looked at before, it is a stressor for educators. And it's something that does need to be addressed. Then also just in general, support across the board. Like for example, someone recommended that perhaps besides personal days and sick days, there are mandated mental health days as well. Um, there is a caveat to this though, because with professional development does come a responsibility from our districts. It highlights the need for districts and administrators to be mindful when introducing additional trainings or initiatives, even if it is based on advocacy, because if they decrease our already valuable planning time and are perceived as performative rather than meaningful, the educators are going to disengage. To truly support our educators, professional development needs to be accompanied by adequate time and resources for teachers to effectively implement and integrate their new strategies into their instruction. As you can see, I did create some joint displays so you can see that the qualitative and the quantitative results do inform each other and lead to some meta inferences. One of the most important, and I'll be honest, I didn't even realize it as I was working through my quantitative results, was the contradiction between higher self-reported TSE and high self-reported feelings of professional inadequacy. But you can see that it is explained by that the high burnout is coexisting with high TSE and self-efficacy. So it's that the environmental stressors are overpowering teachers' sense of control and effectiveness. The implications of my survey, the first and foremost is that teacher self-efficacy seems to be rebounding to pre-pandemic levels, while teacher burnout is not. So since the 2021 school year, when hybrid and virtual instruction peaked, at that school year, the TSE scores were at the lowest, with teachers revealing that they only had some influence, which is a TSES scale score around 5. There was a study done in June of 2021 that showed that those scores went up to about a Likert scale of 6, that they had a little bit more influence. And then my data collected in June of 2023 for this current study revealed continued improvement, with the scores showing teachers felt quite a bit of influence, which is actually a Likert scale of 7. So we can see it creeping back up over time. However, burnout is not recovering. So in January and February of 2023, 56% of teachers nationwide reported feeling burned out, and it's a figure that has remained largely unchanged since the pandemic's height. The study found even higher burnout rates, 66 to 69% of respondents, despite their relatively high TSE. Other things directly from teacher respondent advocacy is that teacher pay must be addressed because it is a key stressor for many educators. There's a continuing pay gap as much as 26% between educators and peers who have the same educational levels in other fields. Student pandemic, I'm sorry. We also know we need to increase professional development and allow the time for the implementation and planning. We need to improve our staffing, school-based and substitute teachers as it directly impacts teacher workloads and mental health, and also the calls for increased social emotional supports for teachers and students. And then lastly, we need to address the student learning loss. As of 2024's National Assessment for Educational Progress scores, they still show that students are behind where they were in 2019 in both reading and math. So, what does this mean for my recommendations for future research? Well, Respondent 25 kind of hit the nail on the head, saying let's actually ask teachers for input and act accordingly. Well, I may not agree that we know how to fix everything. We know how to fix a lot of things that are directly impacting our workloads and our efficacy, but we're not asked, or if we are, our input is not valued. So in general, I do know that there needs to be more generalizability. So I know a wider geographic and demographic population needs to be done. I know that is a limitation of my personal study. So we can have a more comprehensive view of teacher experiences across this country and perhaps globally. Um, I also advocate for continued research into the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, because while people say the pandemic is over, it clearly shows it's still impacting our teachers and students. And this can also help inform stakeholders of what district, school, and community factors are impacting teacher self efficacy and what can help us with teacher retention. And then also advocating for more mixed methods or even straight qualitative TSE research. Districts and administrators need to urgently explore the strategies to retain their effective teachers. This is going to offer a powerful tool for stakeholders by offering teachers a voice and helping guide meaningful improvements to a vocational professional profession where even the most committed professionals are experiencing burnout. So thank you for listening to my results and discussion of my survey and my study. And what questions do you have for me?